Welcome one and all to another week here at the Damage Report, and in fact, to the beginning of a month of Dantastic Mondays. Dan Evans, how's it going?
Great to be with you. Of course, I cannot possibly replace Francesca, but she is with child currently, which is all wonderful, and we congratulate her on. So it's wonderful to be able to fill in for her. I mean,
exactly. Yes. To be clear, though. I've always thought that the expression "with child" is a little bit weird, but now she is actually with child. She's with her child. She had been pregnant, but now she's with child because she did give birth. So yay, that's awesome. And look, I think in a modern, advanced Western nation, she should get at least like 48 hours off and then get back to work, Franny. What the hell? You're really cashing in on this baby thing. But anyway, she's posted on social media about it if everybody wants to go check out her Instagram at Franny Theo. And in the meantime, though, Dan, we are very excited to have you joining us on all of these Mondays. Thank you for doing that.
My pleasure. It's going to be really exciting to see what shenanigans happen leading up to the wonderful midterm election that all of my friends have known about for the past several minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're going to be doing the final run, and I don't know, maybe the week of too. It's gonna be an exciting and consequential election, as they of course all are. And you know what? We got a lot that's gonna be consequential on this show too. Not only updates on what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. We're gonna be talking about that in just a minute, actually. But it was a weekend that just passed that I would classify as everyone just saying the worst stuff kind of a weekend. Everybody just wanted to let out the terrible things that they believe and think, and so we're gonna be covering a little bit of that as well. And there's a little bit of good news, a little bit of fun news. Fetterman's got a new ad that's nothing but fun. And so that will sustain us as we launch into the first Dantastic Monday. In advance of all that though, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and sharing the stream, that'd be great so that people know we're live. And if you wanna send us comments, tweets, or super chats, we'll respond as we go. But with all that said, Dan, are you ready to start the show?
Let's jump in it.
Let's jump in it. Okay, that's thematically appropriate. But warning, we're gonna be talking about war, violence, and death. So consider yourself warned as we launch into this.
У мене знесуться руки, тому що я щойно побачила, як летить ракета. І я почула це.
In that video, you see a young girl in Ukraine capturing what might have been a follow-up strike. Perhaps it's why she started filming, but it was part of the massive wave of missiles that struck in multiple cities throughout Ukraine over the weekend. In response to that, Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, wrote on Telegram there were missiles hitting across Ukraine and that Russian forces were trying to wipe Ukraine off the face of the earth, saying unfortunately, there are dead and wounded, and the number of both dead and wounded has been, of course, as it always does, going up as more on the ground work is done and more news gets out. But here is Mayor Vitaly Klitschko giving an early this morning update on how many had died.
Велика терористична атака російських варварів на столицю та обласний центр України. У Києві ми бачимо зранку влучань в кількох районах. Зокрема, в центрі нашого міста також агресор вдарив по кількох об'єктах критичної інфраструктури. За даними на цей час від ракетних ударів в нашому місті загинули 5 людей.
There is referencing 5 dead just in that city, but I've seen 11 and I'm sure that it will end up being more because these strikes, we can use many terms to describe them, but indiscriminate feels like one of the most important ones. They struck bits of infrastructure, that is true. They also struck parks and government buildings and children's playgrounds and basically all over the place they struck. And I do mean all over the place. So you can see in this next graphic a list of all of the different cities where just where some of the strikes took place over the weekend. It's the length and breadth of Ukraine, including some places like Kyiv that had not had strikes of this sort for some months. And to be clear, Vladimir Putin, he said that the Russian military launched precision weapons from the air, sea, and ground to target key energy and military command facilities. And I will say, I will have to take his word for it. He says that they were precision strikes, and so when they're striking apartment buildings and parks and things like that, I have to believe that he's being honest. Those were precisely targeted strikes against civilian populations by Russia, by Vladimir Putin. And so that's where we're at. He's saying it was in retaliation for an attack against a bridge that was connecting Russia and Crimea. Sure, maybe that's the proximal cause for it. I think that it makes a lot more sense to say that he's been getting his ass kicked all over Ukraine for a couple of months now. He's humiliated and he feels the need to strike out as all weak men do. So I don't know, maybe it's a bit of column A, column B, maybe it's a mix of the two. Dan, what do you think?
I definitely think it's all of the above, as it tends to be in these complicated geopolitical situations. First of all, as always, our hearts go out to the people in Ukraine who are just dealing with yet another day and another week and another month of this invasion and onslaught. And it seems sort of like the current plan is stalemate to some extent. Like, there doesn't seem to be like Russia or Ukraine is arguing for any sort of peace, so to speak. So those on the left who are just anti-war altogether seem to be out of luck. And we're sending billions of dollars over to Ukraine. But in this case, we see why it's important. I don't even trust Putin when he's saying precision strikes, because at home he's at a point where he needs to continue to justify this war when the conscription of service people is increasingly unpopular and the war effort on its own is starting to get a little bit unpopular in the public. But we also know that Putin and Russian, the military in general, has been running out of their best weapons since at least 4 or 5 months ago. So instead, unless they're getting new shipments from China or some other ally that's like keeping it on the down low, Russia doesn't have any precision missiles to work off of. They're using bombs that have sort of like an indiscriminate kind of effect or attack or ability to target, which makes a lot more sense considering the chaos and bloodshed you're seeing here. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to stop, no matter what reason Putin tries to use to justify it, whether it's a Crimean bridge or whatever. This is just a brutal, senseless war that Putin wants to see going on like till its bitter end, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's going to find some way to employ particularly crafted propaganda to make this entirely pointless, wasteful war benefit him personally, not the Russian people. They'll get nothing from this. Not the Russian-speaking Ukrainians who are dying in mass numbers thanks to this war. He might benefit. Some of the other oligarchs might benefit. And as you pointed out, those of us on the left who are actually against all war, this is a terrible. It's been 8 months of just devastation. Others who are against war opportunistically just when it's the United States engaging in it, and they're perfectly fine with other imperial states killing tons of civilians. I guess they're having more fun with this. I don't know. But for those of us who care about the mass death of civilians, this is devastating. So, they did these strikes. Here's some more fun to add to the pile. The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, announced Monday that he and Putin have agreed to deploy a joint regional grouping of troops amid the escalation of fighting in Ukraine. He said that he's worried about Ukraine attacking or invading Belarus or something. Just whatever. Whatever you need to say. You're going along with Russia, you're gonna help invade. I guess there was an excess of your soldiers that hadn't been needlessly dying, and you wants to get in on the death. So send your soldiers across. They'll die too. It'll be amazing for humanity. The cool thing is that we as a species, as a planet, are not facing any crises not of our own making. And so everything's fine and everybody's doing great. And so we can afford to waste time and money and lives in these sorts of pointless attacks. I guess we should give a little bit of credit to Russia. It is nice that they didn't nuke Ukraine, which is now apparently an option on any given day. And so the fact that they only killed civilians with conventional arms is better.
Damning with faint praise. Yeah, that's the whole angle you put in there, John. There's nukes involved here. So it's something we're all really watching with bated breath here. And hopefully this doesn't, Putin's doing a lot of nuclear saber rattling as he has from the beginning. So far over the past 8 or 9 months or so, that's proven to be just that. But obviously we're all watching very closely because we don't want it to escalate any further.
Well, let's now turn to an even dumber angle on this news, starting with this.
would have never happened if I was president. If the election wasn't rigged, this would not have happened. Ukraine and Russia would not be fighting. It doesn't mean they'd love each other, but there's no way that they would be fighting. There's no way that Putin would have gone in. They actually taunted him. If you really look at it, our country and our so-called leadership taunted Putin. And sort of, I would listen. I'd say, they're almost forcing him to go in with what they're saying. The rhetoric was so dumb.
Okay, so I don't particularly care about Donald Trump implying that somehow Putin would have been restrained in his imperial ambitions if only Donald Trump had been in office. I think we can all agree that's on its face moronic, right? We can move past that. Definitely, it would have been an easier time for Putin. He definitely would have invaded. Ukraine wouldn't have gotten the assistance and it probably would have succeeded by now. Can we move past that? No, the more interesting part of this, I think, is hey, you forced him to hit you. You really shouldn't have raised your voice. He wouldn't have punched you if you hadn't done that. And it isn't just that Trump is making this comment. It's been a thing that Trump has been saying for some time, and he is hardly alone on the right or the former left in making this case that no matter what Vladimir Putin does, no matter how barbaric, no matter how many civilians die, it's probably anyone else's fault, literally anyone else, because they forced this kind-hearted dictator to invade another country. Trump had previously described the justification for invading as savvy and genius. And really fast, before we return to them endlessly saying that it's someone's fault other than Putin, think about what's happening here. He's saying, you guys forced him to do it. You left him with no options. You backed him into a corner. He had to do it. Well, then why was it savvy and genius? Savvy and genius sounds like it was a plan of his, a plot of his. He did something clever. Now you're trying to pretend as if he was forced to do this by the US. So which is it? I mean, there is some consistency there. He's taking Putin's side in both of those narratives, Dan. But what do you think?
I mean, it's just yet another, chalk it up to another example of the way Donald Trump works. Like, we know that ultimately he is a guy who will lick his finger, hold it up in the air, figure out where the wind is blowing and talk in that direction and then the opposite direction just to cover his bases. Like, he's just he's not interested in playing the political game for whatever we try to believe it's for, which is arguing for policy or arguing for what's the best way or opinion forward, right? It's just to see who you can rile up, how you can seem right and correct at any given time so that you can have the soundbite of saying, hey, Donald Trump was correct on Russia, even though he said literally everything about Russia to the point where, of course, he's correct. If your options are guess between the numbers 1 and 5, and Donald Trump guesses all of them, sure, your odds are all of them. You're gonna get there.
Yeah, whether the answer ends up being person, woman, cameraman, or TV, he said all of them. So he really covered his bases. You're totally right. Trump is the best example of that, but let's be clear, lots of people do that. Did you know that everyone in media correctly predicted that Trump would win in 2016 and lose in 2020? Everyone. You know why? Because over the course of 2 years of campaigning, everyone at one point or another said that he'd win or said that he'd lose. And so their bases were covered. Everyone except me, obviously. I got it wrong in both cases. Anyway, Trump is not the only person taking Putin's side in this. I also noticed this, Michael Flynn is praising Putin as bold. Yes, I do think that threatening to nuke your neighbor is a very bold move. Zelensky, of course, is a dangerous fool. What a fool, what a dangerous fool. He really should have just lain down and let his entire country become the new province of Imperial Russia. What a fool. How dangerous, Dan. Anyway, on the blaming him thing, so a lot of this stuff is trending on social media about the attacks on Ukraine today. Obviously, it's big news. And I saw Zelensky war criminal trending. And I thought, well, I'm having a great morning, so clearly I need to ruin it by clicking on this, and I did, and I clicked on it, and I came across a cartoon. Let's turn to that now. Rakesh Arora had sent this out. It had, I don't know, hundreds of retweets or something. And the idea is that Zelensky was messing with Russia, and so that's why they did something. And then he goes and cries to the meat. Zelensky, of course, wanted to be invaded. He wanted tons of his citizens to die, clearly. And I saw that and I thought, that doesn't really seem like something a regular person would put together. I mean, come on, really? And so I decided to do an experiment. I took the entire text of that tweet and I put it in the search bar. And I found that it's actually a popular sentiment because Mohammed Shamshir sent the exact same thing. Same image, same text, same spacing, same everything. Akash Sky Tawari, also great minds think alike, sent out that exact same thing. And I'm not gonna burden you with a bunch more, but if you search for it yourself, you'll find many people, all of whom collectively have like 200 followers, sending out the same text, the same image, and a lot of them getting quite a bit of engagement on it. It's a weird but entirely organic expression of political opinion, Dan.
Yeah, normally I find that normal, political memes, they spread the same way that advertising does, where someone over somewhere figures out, oh, this one's getting a couple more retweets than that one. Let's just start pushing this one out so we get our maximum engagement or our maximum traffic here. It's, I think this whole idea of, this, take it to any other context where leftist morality works out, whether it's with relationships, whether it's with imperialism, this whole, oh, look what the smaller country made the bigger country do. Oh, if the smaller country just wasn't aggravating the larger country. And truthfully, I don't want like a smart analysis of, okay, what is NATO's presence in Eastern Europe and what does that represent in relation to Russia? I think there's a good conversation to be had there. But I think the idea of simply reducing that to Zelensky is poking a wasp nest and then complaining that he's getting attacked when how many thousands of people have been killed in this invasion on the part of Russia? It's senseless, it's ruthless, it's meaningless internet points, or you're being a bot.
100%, yeah. Yeah, I do have to say though that after seeing this morning, I do think maybe Elon Musk's got a point. Maybe there are a lot of bots in there. No, he was being as disingenuous in pushing that point as these people are in this point. Look, you can put whatever text, whatever hashtags you want, whatever image you want. The point is, it is perfectly acceptable for Vladimir Putin to absolutely conquer and crush Ukraine and kill as many civilians as he feels like. Honestly, if his numbers start to dip, he should just kill more. It's perfectly fine. We should be fine. We should just watch it as a world. And honestly, if he decides he wants to attack, I don't know, Moldova or something next, or another, that's perfectly fine too. It's awesome and great. Sure, it's imperialism, but it's not American, so it's really okay. That is the lesson that you can get from people like this. In any event, really fast, Dan, I saw some of the Red Light Dragons like, I love the background plant. It is a nice touch, I like it, a little bit of greenery, I need to add that. The only greenery I've got is Grogu. But anyway, with that said, we've got a lot of other news to get to. We're gonna take our first break. We're responding to some of your comments, and we'll be back in just a few. Anyway, with that said, we've got a lot of other news to talk about, so why don't we jump into this? We still don't know exactly what was going through Donald Trump's mind when he decided to steal literally hundreds of secret and classified documents, but we do know one of the things he apparently planned at one point to do with them. Now, I have always been a critic, a skeptic, I would say, of the idea that he planned to sell these documents to another country, secret nuclear documents or something like that. That just seems too James Bond to me. But it turns out that he did want to do something kind of similar. He apparently late last year floated the idea of swapping the files that he had stolen in exchange for, quote, sensitive documents about the FBI investigation of his 2016 campaign's ties to Russia. Now, this is probably on its face a less terrifying plan, to want to get some documents for these rather than giving like nuclear secrets to Russia. But while it's less dangerous, let's also acknowledge that it is way dumber. The idea that he stole all of this secret stuff and what he wanted to do with it was get stupid, dumb documents about the 2016 Russia thing so he could continue to relitigate that until he finally croaks. That is just as dumb as this scandal finally had to become. Here's more details. As the National Archives pressed Trump to return the scores of official documents that were being stored at his Mar-a-Lago state in South Florida and not in their possession, the former president was frustrated by the government agency's refusal to disclose documents that he felt would back up his claims about Russia. Trump told advisors that in order to obtain access to those documents, he would give the archives the boxes of materials that were stored at Mar-a-Lago. Importantly, aides did not go through with the proposal but it was one of many ways in which the former president repeatedly delayed calls by the archives to turn over the documents located at his personal residence. So why exactly the National Archives, in their duty to get the documents, would bargain for other documents? I don't know. Why he didn't just steal those other documents when he was the president? I don't know, Dan. What the hell is going on?
Well, I remember from the massive brain rot of covering the Trump administration daily that at certain point he was under impeachment investigations, and a major line from both like the Trump campaign and every right winger was no quid pro quo. You cannot prove a quid pro quo of any kind. No quid, neither a quid nor a quo, neither quid nor quo, no quid pro quo. What that essentially means, to de-Latin it, is, are you intending to trade something to get something else? So you're saying, John, in defense, the idea that he's trying to sell nuclear documents is a little bit insane. It was like that, I remember that BuzzFeed article that broke right before Trump's original inauguration that was like, oh, there's a P tape and there's a secret Moscow, all this. It was too good to be true, right? There's sometimes where you get those stories like that, but I don't know, maybe he's not selling it, but let's break into the legal terms here. He's exchanging it. He's offering one non-monetary thing for another of value. It's exactly what quid pro quo is. And so basically the same thing is about Trump overall. Of course he's guilty. He's obviously guilty. He does his crimes on camera. It means nothing because we won't keep him accountable until hopefully we do, but it's not seeming like it.
I'm so glad that you made that point, because that is 100%. I mean, we could also throw in that he's kind of trying to get NARA to collude with him on his stolen documents. So no collusion, no quid pro quo. And yet it turns out at the end of the day that when it comes to quid and comes to quo, he is a pro. So anyway, Donald Trump, why are you such a clown? You could have taken the documents then, buddy. God, it's like somebody who's desperate to have robbed their job before they got fired. Like, you can't come back 6 months later just because you come up with the idea now. You have to do it then, idiot. Anyway, thankfully they didn't do it. Or I should say, not that they didn't do it, because that was never gonna happen. He didn't propose it, which would have been hilarious. The National Archives were never going to do that. But importantly, my final point on this part of the story is, he cannot claim to have not understood the crimes he was committing when he's plotting how much value he can get out of what he stole. Anyway, let's move on to another aspect of this. It's been a good week now since we got a real substantive update on what's going on with this investigation into the stolen documents, and we're waiting for Raymond Dearie to come out with his final report, or whatever leaks from it we'll be able to get. That's probably not more than a couple of weeks away. But there is one little update that I think is interesting. Donald Trump would love it if the DOJ, all these investigators, didn't look at any of these documents. Obviously, that goes without saying. But it turns out that there's 2 folders that he's particularly hot to exclude from the analysis, which seems weird. So he's doing these special privilege assertions over the folders, which appear to have direct relevance to the criminal investigation so far. Okay, so people are saying this is significant. Let's dive into what we know about what's in the folders. Obviously, we don't know all of the text. That's the whole point. He doesn't want us to. But apparently, the contents of one red folder, they're marked as containing NARA letters and other copies. A second manila folder is marked as containing NARA letters, 1 top sheet plus 3 signed sheets. So they're letters either to the National Archives or from the National Archives. Okay. He also asserted privilege over 35 pages of documents titled "The President's Calls," as well as a 2017 letter concerning former special counsel Robert Mueller, emails about election fraud lawsuits in Fulton County, Georgia, and deliberations about clemency to a certain MB Ted Sewell and former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich. I forgot that he pardoned Blagojevich. That's a throwback. So, Dan, the way I see it, there's a couple of options here. The spicier, more fun version is the idea that there is something in those calls or the communications around the pardons that's very nakedly corrupt. And when it comes to pardons, that's not difficult to imagine. The other is that maybe this stuff actually has, against all odds, the best claim of some sort of personal privilege, that it's not about the government, although it includes pardon stuff? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is, I think I just have back in my headspace about what we learned from the Trump investigations from his administration. Even though we live in a kangaroo court system and we can't actually try a sitting president for anything illegal that they do, and we actually refuse not to do that, we did learn a lot about Trump's criminal sort of behaviors, his patterns, because he's not a guy who changes up the mix very often. He's got we've got a secret formula for our debauchery and crime, and we're gonna stick to the secret formula because we know it works and people know us and enjoy us for it. So I've known him, at least I've observed him in different times to, okay, he'll always move the goalpost from, I have no incriminating information, there's nothing wrong with me, to, by the way, it's my right to do the wrong things and to hide certain incriminating parts of that investigation from the public. And so I feel like, especially because this has to do with, oh my God, Rod Blagojevich. I remember when they were talking about Obama and Chicago style politics and how that was a whole corruption thing. So I wouldn't be surprised. Trump also holds grudges. We see the Mueller thing in there. I wouldn't be surprised if something around these documents has to do with Obama or birth certificate or something to get dirt there, because Trump is, if anything, but a guy who loves his callbacks. But ultimately, I think this is some kind of crime that he's trying to hold back, or at least evidence towards incriminating information that would just create a whole new Pandora's box of issues for him. Which is probably why he's doing, I don't know, maybe there's someone's finally smart in his legal team who's decided to hold back and say, maybe Don, let's see what we could do to not show that, because this is pretty bad, but that's really bad. Let's not show him that, please.
Yeah, you're totally right about the about the throwbacks. Even pardoning Blagojevich is such a weird throwback when he did it. Like he's not content to just do like Republican corruption. He also does the corruption that in theory we should get from a Democratic president, like pardoning Blagojevich. Why? But you're totally right. And we'll see if we end up, when Raymond Dearie finalizes this thing, if we find out what's in these documents. I feel like at this point, there is an almost perfect 50-50 chance that if we were to be able to read these, it would be the most scandalous stuff we've ever seen, or I would literally fall asleep halfway through. But maybe we'll see. Anyway, with that said, why don't we move on to our C block? There's no chance we are going to be able to get through today without having to talk about this. Dear God, let's do it. Kanye cruised into the weekend with a newfound level of support from the right, and clearly he had to ruin that. And he started talking and talking over the weekend, giving us our Monday Menace. Yes, almost like dominoes falling, Kanye began to be banned from different social media accounts. We'll talk about all of them, but the most important one, the most pressing one, is what caused his Twitter account to get locked. Here's what he wrote: "I'm a bit sleepy tonight." Word of advice: if that's the beginning of your tweet, just go to sleep, buddy. Just go to sleep. Anyway, "I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people." Sorry, if you're on the podcast, I wanna make clear that the Jewish people is in all caps. The funny thing is, I actually can't be anti-Semitic because black people are actually Jew. Also, you guys have toyed with me and tried to blackball anyone who ever opposes your agenda. If you're on the podcast, you need to know that not only is there no punctuation whatsoever, there's weird spacing that makes this really read like a ransom note or a Roseanne Barr rant. So anyway, that has been labeled by many as anti-Semitic, or by Reuters as allegedly anti-Semitic. I don't know, Dan, when you say that you're going DEFCON 3 on a religious group, I feel like you're inviting the anti-Semitism label.
It's not only that, John. It's like he was on the Tucker Carlson show just a couple days earlier saying that the reason the entire reason that Jared Kushner had made any deals in Israel was, because it's to make money, obviously. That's how those things go. And Kanye was even thinking of himself as being cute, like, oh, Teehee, am I allowed to say that on your network? And Tucker Carlson, with the crud-eating grin that he always has, sure, go ahead. You can totally say that on my network. This is free speech. He literally said, we're about free speech here. We don't care what you say. Especially if it's what the Anti-Defamation League notes is like obscenely anti-Semitic. Not only goes against, like it plays into an oddly anti-Semitic trope in a lot of different aspects of rap music that I've talked about in my podcast Audio Face very recently, but it also has to do with Ye sort of like seeking attention in the weirdest, most destructive ways possible. Let's keep in mind here, like, yes, maybe he's going through an episode, maybe not, but I wanna make it clear, just like with the Roseanne Barr situation, there are not medicines you can take or mental states you are under that make you more of a bigot. That stuff is already there. There are just inhibitions that are lessened because of different situations we're in. But that stuff, being bipolar doesn't make you an anti-Semite.
Yeah, exactly. No, you might think that you found a link between bigotry and a substance, but it's probably just a correlation. Like, yes, a lot of those people are big fans of ingesting ivermectin and colloidal silver, but it's not a causal relationship that we're identifying there. Anyway, what I love about this statement isn't just the weird anti-Semitism, the death con thing, which, it's that he seems to understand in his foggy state. He still understands that he's probably gonna get criticized for being anti-Semitic. And so he makes this claim that he can't be anti-Semitic because black people are actually Jew. This doesn't appear to be saving him, Dan. Do you think this is going to help him out at all, that preemptive defense?
Yes, it will. Like, no, there's a very, and again, we're reading from Kanye West here. This isn't the most like he is a scholar. He read this all information. I'm not talking bad on him. And that Tucker Carlson interview, he said that he doesn't read books. He doesn't like books, by the way. So I'm not making a jump here. But he's making this weird sort of case that's floated around in certain areas of the black community. Like, oh, there's black Israelites and Hebrew Israelites who are come before the Jews or the original thing. And like, it's sort of not a full ideology that gets played out, but this will appeal to a certain set of, manosphere type black conservatives. Yeah. Who are looking for, just another reason to say, hey, well, you know what? I like conservatism and I like Trump and I like all these things that are ultimately detrimental to marginalized communities, including the black community. But ultimately, I'm fine with that because, oh, look, Kanye West approves of it and there's a black guy approving it. And also it helps me with my bottom line and all this misogyny doesn't personally affect me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And look, even if there were black Israelites or something, like you can still be anti-Semitic. Like that's a thing. Like now maybe there's a higher, burden of proof or evidence or something. But if the message that you're spreading is that Jewish people control everything, in this case, all the social media, but input whatever industry you want. Jewish people control everything. They're the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes. I don't care at that point if you're a rabbi, it's anti-Semitic, that's what it is. If that's not anti-Semitic, I don't know what is supposed to be at this point. And look, as is often the case on the damage report, we're joking around a little bit, okay? We're smiling, okay? It's not a viral, bit of advertising for the movie Smile. This is a defense mechanism. But let's be clear, this is bad. Okay, and if you are, if you're Jewish and you're worried about what this might lead to, knowing that there has been a lot of lethal violence against Jewish communities, community centers, synagogues and all that, then I get it. I get why you're worried about this. This is as someone pointed out, Kanye West has, I didn't do the math, that's what they're saying, has more Twitter followers than there are Jewish people. I don't know if that's true, that's what they said. And so he has a very big platform. And if he is providing cover for anti-Semitism, the belief that these conspiracy theories are true, then yeah, I would be very worried about that. And it doesn't matter if he occasionally sings songs or puts out t-shirts or something. If his product today is anti-Semitism, then yeah, I think that people should be very worried about that.
And one last thing, John, really fast. Another reason why people are so upset with him, especially in the Black community, because Candace Owens has already tried to co-opt his message, and a lot of other people are saying, they're getting what they want. They have their token, so to speak. Tucker Carlson, they're getting exactly what they want here. But the terrible irony is that the same people who are forwarding anti-Semitism, who are like, yes, Kanye West is doing exactly what we want him to do, they're also not that fond of Black people. They're the exact same people who we talk about all the time, these extreme right wingers who are closer to power in America than they have been, honestly, since the 1930s. And Kanye's up here going, I'm going to sing and dance for this group of people. I'm going to wear a White Lives Matter shirt and throw away all my credibility for that. There's a word even worse than betrayal that I have for that I won't use here, but Kanye West is an absolute buffoon.
I think we could probably guess. Yes, yes. If you think, not you, Dan, but if there's a person watching this that thinks that conservatives who consume a lot of like Candace Owens content come out the other side with less bigotry, I got news for you. That ain't how it works. Anyway, with that said, let's turn to another angle on this. The hosts of Fox and Friends came out of the weekend feeling like it was their duty to defend Kanye West, whose Twitter account had been locked over some of the comments he made. And here is how they chose to defend him.
And we're in this weird era where people can't just say what they want to say and take responsibility, for what they said, whether it's with the sale of his shirts or his companies, whatever. But this idea that you have to just shut down his account is just, it's totally totalitarian, totally anti-American, and I think it's just wrong.
I don't know what he said. Maybe it was
that's what I understand.
Anti-Semitic.
We should clear that up, though.
Listen, I'm no fan of anti-Semitism at all.
Of course.
But the question you have to ask yourself is, would he have been restricted on Instagram if he hadn't given the Tucker Carlson interview?
So let's be very clear. This is not the most difficult job in the world. The bar is very low to do it. But I've always felt like you should probably read the tweet before you do the segment. And they're gonna discover that in real time, because while their instinct, their gut reaction was, we gotta defend him. Oh, even though we don't like anti-Semitism, turns out that during one of the breaks, someone printed out the tweet for them. And so they came back and their commentary was a little bit different. Take a look.
Thank you.
Unfortunate. I mean,
Pretty ugly.
It's ugly.
Yeah.
And but we talked about it earlier without knowing about these tweets and saying, of course, they're going to put a target after what he said with Tucker. There's going to be a target on him, no doubt. Yeah. But in this particular case, I mean, he brought the target with that.
Yeah, in a similar way that you brought the target for us mocking you, Pete Hegseth, because the tweet was more than a day old, and by its very nature, it's less than 280 characters. Maybe you could have actually read it before knee-jerk defending a guy who was facing claims like from the ADL that he was being wildly anti-Semitic. Dan, what do you think?
And again, he was being anti-Semitic in the Tucker Carlson interview on your network. So there's, other than the fact that, yeah, he really is that lazy at his job that a lot of these media people are, and I'll say that's a fact. It does, when you get good at this, I would not say by any means I am. I would definitely say you are, John. But when you get good at this, other people who are like watching these shows, they honestly think that you just like wake up, you just pay attention to news, you just start talking about it. No, there's a lot of prep. There's a wonderful production team behind us that's making all this happen, that make us all like sound really smart to know these things. It helps to have a passing knowledge of this, but because like 3 or 4 of us in independent media have integrity still, wouldn't comment on anything on camera and upload that video without knowing what's going on it, especially if I wouldn't comment on air even saying, oh, I haven't read these things before, but I'm going to double down on it, because then you're just nakedly showing I'm not reading, I just have a preconceived notion with this. And the narrative they're trying to build is that Fox News, the beacon of free speech, whatever Ye is saying, rightfully or wrongfully, but especially rightfully if it's the anti-Semitism, which, to be fair, in the Fox host defense, he says he's not a fan of it. And I'm not a fan of anti-Semitism either. I'm a Chargers fan, I like the Clippers. Anti-Semitism, not so much. But like, it's all to go within their narrative that they are the free speech bastions, and they use that as a cover for all their bigotry that you're really seeing mask off more than usual this week.
100%. Okay, well, look, Kanye is he's one of the first of three, I think, people saying completely unacceptable things. We've got more for you, including consequences for what someone said. That's coming up after this. Okay, everybody, not much time. Let's jump right into it.
Black people. I go, what is with Bonnie? And I said, Bonnie thinks he's black. That guy don't think he's black. I go, he thinks he's black. I told her the same thing.
This kid is.
He goes, why are they so close? See, during Black History Month, lo lleva al council. Y lo pone acá en el, remember? It's an accessory. When we do the MLK parade.
Just like when.
They used to have those statues in plantations.
Yeah.
Bonnie would be like, hey, Nuri, are you going to the MLK? Well, Herb invited me, yeah, I'll go. Okay, I'm bringing whatever the kid's name is. I'm like, it's like the oddest thing. It's like black and brown on this float. And then there's this white guy with this little black kid who's misbehaved. Este niño has they're not doing, the kid is bouncing off the effing walls on the float, practically tipping it over. There's nothing you can do to control him. Parece changuito. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm over here trying to parent this kid. I'm like, you can't do that. I said no. And Mike is like, I'm like, you're not teaching your kid anything. It's me and Karen Bass on the floor trying to check this little kid.
Yes.
They're raising him like a little white kid, which I was like, this kid needs a beat down. Like, let me take him around the corner and then I'll bring him back.
Yeah.
¿Se me entiendes? Ven para acá.
It's a pinch. Something.
That is the voice of LA Council member Nuri Martinez laughing it up as she is quoted there. I understand that audio is hard to make out. The important point, though, is when she refers to the black child of another council member as that little monkey. And it's very, I think, understandable in 2022 to hear something like that come out and just think, man, our society, our political discourse just continues to devolve and there's never any consequences for anything. However, in this case, the consequences were almost immediate. Councilmember Martinez has resigned from the LA City Council following the scandal that broke this weekend. She put out a statement saying, I ask for forgiveness from my colleagues and from the residents of this city that I love so much. In the end, it is not my apologies that matter most. It will be the actions I take from this day forward. I hope that you will give me the opportunity to make amends. Therefore, effective immediately, I am resigning as president of the Los Angeles City Council. Dan, like I said a minute ago, like normally they just buckle down, they say, well, I was joking or something else, or they muddy the waters a little bit and then they get past it. This was, not only did they actually resign, Nuri Martinez, but almost immediately.
Yeah, and this was a really quick development. I mean, I was paying attention to Twitter as this was happening, and shout out to LA Times and Knock.LA for really getting the message out of these recordings and really having that reporting ready to go. Because, I mean, I don't know, especially John and I think we've had these conversations about how we on the West Coast kind of feel like chopped liver when it comes to political news. And so whenever we have a scandal happening in our neck of the woods, we're like, oh, interesting. We'll see how this happens. But yeah, it actually had a lot of attention on a national level. And people were really offended by not just the person who made these comments, but the other council people who were kind of like egging her on. I mean, yeah, the other like council person who was like sitting on this, like Mike Bonin and whoever, was talking about how, yeah, this is gonna be a wonderful way to expose our 2-year-old son to the wonderful world of racism. To have to explain once he comes to terms that, oh yeah, by the way, there was a sitting legislator or someone who's like paid for by the city of Los Angeles, or at least at one point, to say these things about you for literally no reason because you were a 2-year-old kid. I really feel bad for that kid. I really feel bad for that family. I'm not gonna give any credit for the reaction that she is having as a result by stepping down, because shouldn't have made those comments to begin with. Stepping down and like taking responsibility for your actions is the very least you could do at this point.
Exactly, yeah, and to be clear, while the Spanish terms, which translates roughly to that little monkey, is the worst thing that she said. She also says they're raising him like a little white kid. I was like, this kid needs a beat down. 2-year-old. Let me take him around the corner and then I'll bring him back. Like,
there's a lot to break down from that statement alone.
You gotta go. Like you gotta go. And like, I get that some people will be like, well, we call kids monkeys and stuff. Well, you can't do that in this case. And I don't think that that's too much to ask. And even if you could have dodged that one, you probably shouldn't be like just jovially chatting with your friends about how you'd like to beat a little child that someone else's kid. I don't feel like this bar is particularly high, Dan. I feel like this is a very reasonable thing. And by the way, some people, I don't know, like they have this view of California as being a very progressive place. And in some ways it is more progressive, but LA, specifically the city, has a lot of history of racism. We still have the LAPD. There are reasons to be worried about powerful people harboring these sorts of thoughts. And so I'm glad that there was consequences for her. I would love to see what's gonna happen with the others on the call and everything. But anyway, interesting development, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that said, why don't we move on to the third video from this section? So we're gonna talk a little bit about Tommy Tuberville. Why don't we launch right into that whenever you're ready?
Some people say, well, they're soft on crime. No, they're not soft on crime. They're pro-crime. They want crime. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Bull. They are not owed that.
Jesus, so he's not just a crazy Republican candidate. He's a sitting senator saying that all the Democrats are literally pro-crime, which would be bad enough, incendiary enough, but they want reparations because they want the people that do the crime to have your stuff. Like it's a dog whistle loud enough that dogs living in other solar systems' ears began to bleed. And he felt very, like, this is not a hot mic. Can we be clear about that? This is not Maggie Haberman has a book and 2 years later she says, I overheard an aide say that he said. No, this was him at a Trump rally in front of a crowd of people talking about how reparations are gonna go to the people who commit the crimes. Dan, what are your thoughts?
I think that's such a really great point to bring out here is that there was let's get rid of the lie that American politics was never like this. No, American politics was worse than this, except that, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, as you got more and more recording technology, this stuff started to be said, in behind closed doors and became less acceptable to say these things while you got some, marginal improvements for marginalized communities here and there in terms of social policy. And then for every one step forward you got there, you got 3 steps back with the crime bill and things like that. But now, you do have politicians who feel empowered, emboldened to not only feel comfortable to say these kind of statements, saying these statements is politicking, saying these statements is red meat. This is how you get your base energized. And yeah, by jumping straight to the point there, they're saying that, oh yeah, reparations will be giving money straight to the criminals. Never mind that reparations is not really an argument any Democrat's seriously talking about right now. Never mind that that's not really an argument that any Republican's seriously going to interact with right now. They're just jumping to reparations. That's the thing Black people want, right? So let's not give the criminals, notice how I just switched criminals and Black people there, any of the money. And that's exactly what they think. It's what they're reaching out to. And like you're saying, John, this is what Tommy Tuberville thinks as a politician will help him, will get him more support, will get him more people like fired up. And that's scary about American politics right now.
Yeah, and he might well be right. His entire argument there is the Democrats want to give your stuff to Black people. That's all it is. That's maybe the particular person saying it could be a little bit savvy in one case, less savvy in another if it's Marjorie Greene. But that's what they're campaigning on. Meanwhile, the poor conservatives that he's giving this speech to that apparently need help, they're so worried about their stuff being stolen and given away. They're so on the edge. He's also calling for an end to food stamps. So like, you should be worried about Democrats giving your stuff to Black people. Also, we're gonna take away any government support whatsoever. It's a weird little 1-2 punch they give you there. Anyway, there's lots more to come in the aftermath. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.